We have quorum, so we're good to go. Did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes from March 27th?
Yes.
It was like one typo on page 2. The paragraph, like just like up above number 5, the paragraph went, Councilwoman Larson recapped the community workshops. Where it says requested again, that's a COAC. I think it's supposed to be CPAC. I mean, if you want to just be technical.
Yeah, that's fine. We make that correction.
Technical is good.
All right. Do I get a motion to approve the minutes from March 27th?
I so move.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, so we do have Noah Levine on from BFJ Consulting, so if we have any questions or comments, but he's really here to listen and see our process and how we've been doing it and hear our feedback and our conversation to get an idea of how we've been working. So, you know, the chapter we're going to discuss tonight is governance. So I do have the SharePoint chapter open with questions and comments. And then we do have the comments from that were posted to the website. So they're here, and we're just going to go over some of those and kind of incorporate them as necessary. Let's see. Hey, Ben.
Hi, Ben.
So we'll get started at the top of the chapter. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up before we begin? Any questions, comments, or right off the bat issues?
The consultants on the line.
Yes.
You saved some money.
Okay.
I mean,
so
First question. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, Noah, I know you're on the line, but, you know, I would love to, at some point, get him to opine on kind of what does good governance look like and what have we seen, just given his work with the other, you know, like Southampton and some of the others, like what is it that good governance looks like? Because I think that also allows us to measure.
like what is,
you know,
like what departments do they have?
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of for the size of the town, what?
Good governance.
Oh, all right. I thought it was better.
That's it, we can all go home.
I almost wrote CPAC on the bottom of magic marker. Yeah,
I guess I can try to answer that question. It's a tough one because we haven't gotten into the details. Usually what we would do is, you know, meet with staff department heads. Sorry, my baby's crying. Staff department heads and town officials to kind of understand needs and opportunities. Sometimes there's a need for professional staff that's, you know, to help, you know, for code enforcement or planning or you know, what have you. And that usually comes out through some of those interviews. And then it comes down to obviously, you know, budgetary decisions. Typically in the governance chapter, we do talk about staffing and municipal needs. And, you know, capital budget needs, that sort of thing. We don't get into taxes. In the comprehensive plan, you wouldn't really get into taxes or you know, too much of that. That's usually handled in the capital budget. You know, this is kind of a long range planning document. So, but if there are kind of strategic planning needs from a government standpoint, we would get into that. It's hard to say, you know, what a town does because, you know, Shelter Island is, you know, different in so many ways in other communities, but I don't think that there's a rule of thumb. Some communities that have that are small, that have a lot of development activity, you know, might have a bigger planning department staff. Others, you know, choose to sometimes hire a third party to help kind of on an as needed basis to, you know, deal with certain issues. But, yeah.
I think that answers, thank you, Noah, that answers some of my questions, because I was also going to say, like, what needs to be core to, you know, government, what can be resourced through experts or, you know, consultants. The other question I had too that I thought might be worth a little bit of conversation too is maybe what we've seen a need for technology. I mean, I know there were some comments in there about a lot is still done on paper, but also, you know, Noah, it would be great to hear from you. how you've seen technology brought in to help create, additional efficiencies. It may obviously change some roles. It may create the need for new ones. What kind of efficiencies does that create? How does that help from a, planning, auditing, perspective? Because obviously there's a lot of difference now in terms of technology, and there will be going forward. I'm not suggesting we use, ChatGPT in replace of people, but, there will be obviously things to consider from a technology perspective going forward. I just wondered if that is something that we, want to
Yeah,
look at.
absolutely. No, absolutely. I think there are a lot of different things you can do. I don't, I haven't surveyed, all of the, government functions, but I have read the chapter that you prepared, and it seems like that was something that was important. Digitizing records is important, and things having to do with the building department, building permits, applications, site plan approvals, all of that stuff. There are ways to digitize that so it's easy to disseminate information, have things a little bit more predictable for property owners. They know, what zone they're in, what's the history for a particular application, or and so on. So that's helpful, certainly for a lot of communities. Also having really good GIS records in your department to identify local resources and that sort of thing. And then also from a communication standpoint, having a calendar of events is helpful. A lot of communities don't have that and are seeing the need to do that, not just town related events, but other kind of just generally community, just have like a one-stop hub for some of those things is a nice thing to have, to bring people to the town's website. And then, yeah, there are other ways of, getting out the way, other communication and social media things. There's varying levels you can get into, but from an admin perspective, I think those few are, I guess those are important things to look at.
They're cursorily discussed in the chapter body, I see, but they are in findings, the need for modernization is in findings and in challenges, and Meg just added goals and two action items under goals and objectives.
Right.
I don't think we need to specify that, docs are filed under
No.
applicant names.
Digitization and, what can technology do to help enable? I like the point particularly too about communication, which I think Wendy hits on one of the things that you talked about, right? It was just the need for communication in the town.
Right.
I definitely agree with that. And I would like to see your thoughts on kind of, to me, the governance is kind of sounds like an oxymoron, but it's maximizing the efficiency.
Yeah.
So I'm more curious into like, is the current processes, the process that we're using, are they the best way to do it?
Right.
Usually not. There's always a better way to do something, How do we, overall make the process of whatever issue comes up, how does it get to the right people? How does the right information get to the right people? And make sure that is clearly communicated to everyone. So that's a little bit more of a deeper dive. I definitely agree with updating technologies, which will cause efficiencies, but just the overall process of, what committee sees what, who handles this, and what's the best way to kind of streamline.
Is that comprehensive plan material?
That's part of my question it's definitely something that needs a deep dive on. This may not be the appropriate place, so.
Each committee needs to have that set of policy guidelines and procedures in place, and the question we could ask is, are they there?
Right, and even just a cursory look at some of the committees, I'd like to see, the purpose up front. There's that for like the Conservation Advisory Committee, that's on there, but some of these other committees, I feel like often kind of get off gear a little bit on maybe what their assigned purpose was. So just certain things like that.
Right.
More of a sense of functions for all the committees and what they're supposed to do, what they've been doing, what they might do.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a comprehensive plan, but maybe some sort of internal review or external review.
Have an establishing legislation, usually, the committee, so that's really their like sort of governing document. But what I think I've noticed in my short time here is committees tend to
Make their own mission.
And it tends to fall to the bottom. In other words, the big hard stuff, you know, where it could be unpopular or very difficult decisions to make because you're gonna make, you know, some people unhappy. Yeah, let's just decide this easy stuff down here or run with this. And because you know, when you're doing it a while, I just think you can maybe there's such a thing as committee fatigue. But I've seen it kind of repeatedly.
To your point about having the mission of the committee on the page or even their enabling legislation, Christina and I actually did this like at the beginning of the year. We went through all the websites or all the pages for all the different committees and made a master list of all the ones that needed updating and what information was missing from the page. And we've slowly been adding it as we have a hot second to try to get all the pages up to date so that all of them have the enabling legislation for that committee, have the mission statement, have the procedures, like, so we've been getting there. It's just been a slow process.
Yeah, and that's a good first step. And like I mentioned in one of my comments, you know, there's a lot of overlap with certain committees, especially when you debate like anything water
Right.
quality related with, you know,
Well,
various boards. And
yeah.
it seems a little stovepipe at times. And it's very difficult for a committee member to attend other committees.
Yep,
What does stovepipe mean?
like a silo.
Oh,
Like
not reaching across.
compartmentalized.
Okay.
So, you know, if there is a better process to share information even in between committees, or if an issue touches on water and, you know, the environment in some specific way, all right, it needs to get looked at and signed off by this committee, just a little more formal of a process.
Right.
Maybe that's me being naive on a certain amount, but
No, that makes sense. A lot of the committees though, like mostly the water committees, have to have, like, it's in their enabling legislation that they have to have, like WQI has to have a member also on WAC. They also have to have a member in CPF. They also, so that way you do get that crossover and they're supposed to report back to their committees. So like if you're on a dual track, like if you're in WQI and WMAC, you're supposed to keep that link alive between the two committees. And I think we need to remind the people who are duly appointed on two separate committees that that is part of their job, is to report back and to make sure they're communicating what's going on in each committee to the other committee so that everybody is informed. Because that was one of the things that they did that was pretty smart when they set up the committees, is that there is overlap between some members with the hope that they do communicate and that they can, you know, bring information from one committee to the other.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
One thing that we do recommend often in communities, because we see this a lot, where you have a lot of committees that, you know, meet either regularly or not, you know, oftentimes they're, you know, meeting on their own and there's no reporting back to the wider community. And we think it's good to do, and, you know, to have them as a mandate, do an annual report, you know, doesn't have to be extensive, but, you know, a couple pages on, you know, what did you know, how often did you meet? What did you do this year? What are your priorities? That sort of thing. Because, you know, I think having something like that helps just have a deliverable to help everyone understand what it is that they're working on, something kind of formal.
I like that. Well, yeah, or even if it's just an annual, like, multi-committee meeting where everybody goes through what they've been working on, or maybe twice a year.
I see where the heads, the committee heads are meeting, anybody else wants to come.
Right, more coming from the committee head and not the town board liaison.
Right.
Getting a different
Exactly.
voice and showing that community engagement.
Yeah.
Do they do meeting minutes and everything like we do?
Oh, yeah.
And are they put, I know I should probably know this, are they put on the town website so that?
On their page.
On their page.
That's what you have to go to their page.
agree,
Yeah.
timely.
I'm just getting back to, John, you brought up a point, I think, in our last meeting of, you know, how are we kind of holding people accountable to the principles of the comprehensive plan? I just wonder if there's something in that as well, which is, here's the broader Shelter Island remit, here's the impact on this committee, so then how are the activities that you're engaged in aligned? That's how.
A town board, I think, right, saying, the comprehensive plan says, you know, the town board would like this committee to work on this action plan this year, on this action point this year. I would almost think you'd have to, right?
And that gets to Noah's point about the annual report is like, did you meet, what did you accomplish, what barriers are there?
So there's 2 meetings, one in January to sort of talk about assignments,
and then
really,
a-
and then one in December to wrap it up.
You know, I think we brought up before, at the end of this, after you compile all the action items, we then designate, responsible departments. I think that falls right in
Yeah.
line with what you're talking about.
Yes,
Yeah, so somehow
yeah.
capture what we just said.
I already put it in a motion.
Okay, all right.
I'm on top of
But
it.
just, yeah, and I think to the point of, where Noah has seen what others have done, or just what, and this, Wendy gets it, kind of, this is what good governance looks like, right? And working towards that. Versus just an action item, just so that there's a little bit of background.
Well,
So-
and a big point of this comprehensive plan, like Noah was telling me, is actually the implementation portion of it. So like there is going to be a section at the end on how to implement the plan and how to follow through with it and follow up and check back with it and make sure that it is like a living, functioning, working document.
Yeah, definitely. We will add to some of the recommendations that are already in there. One thing I was thinking, and talking about, what I mentioned before with regard to having a better system for managing building applications and zoning, variance requests, that sort of thing. If you brought a representative from the planning board, the zoning board, and the town board into a meeting just to talk about just efficiencies, ways to improve the system and what's needed. That could just be a task force. It could be, 3 people or 5 people, but it would just be more technical, and you just get at, okay, how can we better coordinate these activities, and what do you need? What's working for you, what's not working for you. That kind of meeting, I think, would be really helpful to, get at, what the best system, what's needed from a, IT standpoint.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that like a focus group as a part of this process?
Yeah, I mean, that would
I
be,
just wanna make
that would be
sure.
like, for the town, that would be like an internal working group where you'd have like one town board member, one member of,
Yeah.
planning board, one member of zoning board and the building department. And those 4 people would sit down and be like, okay, what are obstacles for you doing your job? What works well when you're doing your job? Where is the communication lacking? Where is it strong? And then you try to figure out how to fix that. And that's what that would be.
So that would be written right into the comprehensive plan in some way. That's something we need to add to our governance procedures.
Yes. Yes.
And we can even start to have, at least start that meeting. We can to help to identify some of those things, and then it can continue on after the comp plan is done. But it's definitely certainly we can get started on that now.
Mhm.
I liked your point, Sean, about maximizing efficiency, because I think there's probably some opportunity there. Clarity.
Yeah.
I mean, and in the same theory, not just with our committees, but in talking to department heads, you're going to find that the same way, that how does the supervisor's office, with the town clerk's office, with the building department, with the, other assessor's office, how do all of those systems work? Each has a certain responsibility in managing the town, with finances and operation, how do internal systems, paying the bills, right?
Right.
It's just all different ways. The highway department, I didn't forget about that, yes. So there's been a lot of ways of updated software, et cetera. All of that has to, same type of scenario. Small task force to bring all those types
Right.
together and do the same thing, because there are inefficiencies going on there also. Having worked here many times before.
Okay.
I don't know at what point we get to the point, but it sounds like we're missing continuity between a lot of what's happening here. And we have people coming and going all the time. Are we at the point where we should have a town manager that is more of a long-term person that can coordinate and pull all these various aspects together?
Right.
And with more mission focused.
I think anybody who walks through these doors thinks that. Now, we've been told that our classification as a town prevents a town manager position like the civil service doesn't recognize it. I believe that's where that happens. But we have been sort of starting to just try to identify what would we call that person? And how would they be appointed?
And what would their actual job description entail? Like, what would
So-
their
Because
responsibilities?
there's HR.
So it'd be deputy to supervisor.
It
Yeah,
sounds
yeah.
different because in some towns, town manager takes the place of a supervisor and runs the town. It's a different kind of a system.
Right, and if we could do that.
Entirely. So
Right.
whether you want a different kind of a position or whether we're really looking at the need for a different structure is a
Yeah.
question.
One of the answers we got was that in other towns of our size, the deputy supervisor would act as that town manager. However, and that person can be a layperson who's appointed by the supervisor, but that person can change with the supervisor. So, then you don't really have that continuity carrying across different boards. Because, they serve at the pleasure of the supervisor. So that still leads to turnover and may not be the most effective way to do it. So that's kind of what we're, juggling. So I did put in here as an action item, look into the hiring of a town manager, knowing that maybe that exact title wouldn't apply, but something similar could apply and carry through different boards and supervisors.
Even the highway superintendent positions, a lot of them have, deputies. And those deputies kind of maintain through the highway superintendents. That new highway super that's coming in has no clue what's happening. You have the knowledge of the guy that's been there, so,
Jay, is that person a union person?
no,
No. So job protection is what? Or not? I don't know.
do your job.
Knowledge.
Job. I couldn't work without you.
Exactly, be indispensable.
All right. Okay, so in terms of,
The political piece of.
right,
It's all based upon civil service, so it's all about classification, how much our budget and our assets and all these different things that all fall into a formula, so.
define it.
Define it.
And I just have to add that first we'd have to build them an office. Say that.
Yeah.
Would the planning department be an appropriate spot or appropriate option,
Department?
like the planning?
Well, first we'd have to have a
You would
planning
have
department.
to establish something along those lines, which
Right.
would happen if you had it full-time.
It would be more of an administrative role. It would really be in more of a management, like managing the day-to-day staff, managing conflicts within staff, managing communication between the different departments. I mean, that's really the job you're looking for. And that's also part of the job that I believe the supervisor is supposed to do, but you get so much on your plate, it's hard to do all the things. So, that's why the one thing that we were told is that, the supervisor can appoint a deputy to help that with that managerial aspect of it.
May we ask, have you been given that function as deputy or not? No, we're just talking hypothetically.
Hypothetically. Amber is the deputy supervisor. And so, but
And it's really a remit for
It's
fiscal as a controller, because we don't have one of those either.
yeah, but I'm saying in other municipalities with small towns, they'll have like an additional person who's not voted on to be part of the table, who helps with the administration. So it's kind of tricky. It's kind of a weird, I don't know, we have to sort it out. But I have, the hiring of a town manager, or the like.
Director of operation.
Yeah, it's be kind of a.
Another aspect of that role, which I think is important, that they could be the keeper of the comprehensive plan. In other words, through different administrations, what I've noticed over the years is that each administration comes in, they treat the plan differently.
Right, different interpretation.
We garbage can, we had all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
So to have one person who's very consistent, civil service, I think is a good idea. That way they could be managing, making sure, okay, we're getting off track here, where is this? If it's action item 15 on it, why aren't we working on action item number 1? I mean, we talked about it before. We kind of go to the easy things, so anyway.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to address any of these comments that have been made in here?
Well, I think I have another general I have a few other comments, I think, about the plan itself. I think it would be nice to see some sense of where we've come from. Let's say what have been the changes in our town administration, say, since 1990? A paragraph or two that lays out, which we've tried to do in almost every chapter, you know, a little bit of the background, what we've added, what, you know, et cetera, as we're looking ahead to other changes. It would be, I think, very important to have where we've come from, you know, and what positions have been added, what type, you know, how,
What kind of
a little bit of an
growth or
assessment.
expansion we've gone through. or not.
Right. I think something like that would be useful. It would be useful for me reading it. You don't know where we've started and what's new.
Nothing.
And very little, I mean, I think maybe just a
I'm
few
not being
committees have been
facetious.
added. And maybe some clerks. but-
Yeah, but no, there's
Yeah.
been no structural change.
But a deputy supervisor is a new position within our structure. That's something we did not have in the
In the
90s.
90s, yeah.
Amber, you know, Jerry's appointment of that is something, that's the first time we've really had that, I think, more recently in like maybe the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Does she have a specific set of functions?
Yeah, she's going to
It's mostly budgetary fiscal.
Yeah.
fiscal.
It's not
Which-
And actually now, she's backed off of that and given a good portion, if not, a good portion of it goes now to Shelby Monday.
Because she's doing
The
more,
staff.
she's been trained.
Because she's been trained. And so, you know, and along with the money, along with the, you know, so, you know, and that was the goal kind of from the beginning. Because Shelby's, you know, relatively new, 3 years,
Well, more than that.
is she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's your town bookkeeper. That was the position of Fran Springer to.
You're really going
back. Yes, we're going way back, but that was that position forever and ever.
Right.
If we made the change to create the deputy supervisor to deal with fiscal issues, we could also, going forward, make the change to have a second deputy supervisor to deal with the operations issues.
Right.
And
you know-
I like it as a separate position
It-
rather
yeah.
than another appointee
Add
from
on.
the kind of transient group.
Yeah.
Right. I agree with you that it would be good if that person who is the manager or the director of operations, as Ben says, is kind of outside of that politically appointed circle. Yeah. I think that would have more
Yeah, it should be
consistency.
insulated from
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think getting back to Lily's point, it would be good to see kind of where have we come from, and you know, anytime you look at an organization, whether it's a government organization, a corporate, a nonprofit, whatever, it's what are the roles, what are the functions or the job responsibilities, what do we need, you know, what do we need to keep, what might we change just because it's no longer needed, it can be digitized or technology enabled. We now have different needs. I think just understanding kind of the structure and the roles and kind of what they perform gets to some of the things that we've been talking about too, in terms of whether it's efficiency or communication or what the expectation of the role
And it
is.
sounds even more important because the last time we did this was 1994.
Yeah,
And we didn't have iPhones back then.
I was just going to say, there have been a few changes, which just brings some clarity. And,
you know, some of
and
those
who is
changes-
responsible for the financial aspects, who is responsible for, or at least leading, and then who is a part of.
Yeah, I mean, and some of those changes, the changes to technology have led to hiring because now you need someone who works specifically with tech, someone who does the website, someone who, you know, and all your clerks need to be trained on how to upload all the things to the website, how to make sure these things function. So it does create new needs,
So
you know?
wouldn't
No,
the
absolutely.
comprehensive plan then say this historical and contextual evaluation needs to take place and the town should make adjustments? Not that the comp plan does this.
No,
this
no, but I think it needs to be,
But that is, it's an assignment for the future.
Yeah.
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 The near future.
yeah.
It could be an
Yeah,
assignment
I
to
would say very-
reevaluate every so many years.
Yeah, exactly.
At this
Yeah.
level, you
Right.
could,
Positions and
Right.
functions, so it's
Yeah.
an assessment.
Yeah,
That's it.
Assessment.
yeah, and you had something in about like annual performance.
Yeah, we
Right.
just, it's.
But this is not performance, we're looking really at a job,
Yeah.
what is,
sort of-
what needs to be done, functions, right?
Yeah, and that may be every couple of years.
you know,
Right,
whatever
that's,
is determined.
yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't really ask this question, but we have so many committees. How do those committees evaluate themselves? Is there an internal 360 review on each committee so they can evaluate each other?
I can tell you, they all think they're doing good.
Okay. Put that in the comprehensive plan.
Well, it's something that we kind of we just went over recently. So we all just had a training on doing performance reviews.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, my brain is slow.
And they're
So,
and they're all different.
Departmental.
but doing them
Styles of
departmentally and then also doing them for the committees. And first, we're just going to start with department heads, because then from there, then department heads do their department, and then, so we'll work down the chain. And then the liaisons would do it with the committees would do their self-reporting, it's a whole process. So we did just start that. So we're working on getting that implemented.
And that, well, we should talk about that in the governance section of the comprehensive plan.
Right. Well, and that, yeah, so I'm looking at the action plans for the governance chapter, and performance reviews, annual performance reviews are an action item, but it's something that we've already started initiating.
Just in looking at the roster of employees that we have, our organizational chart, I don't see anything here for HR.
We don't.
Why?
Barbara kind of takes that position.
Barbara, yeah.
That's a major thing though.
I think that's what we're talking about, a director of operations or a manager.
But even now, that should be listed in here. Somebody should be the person that's HR that's in the list.
Okay.
Well, it's one of those sticky technology issues, because these days, outsourcing HR is pretty much the gold standard. But you still need an internal person to manage the outsourcing of the HR, which
Now, what
is
do
this
you
director
mean-
of operations.
What do you mean by, what gets outsourced specifically? But you're talking private, so we just have to take that into consideration.
Yes, that's true.
But go ahead, no, but I'd like to know, but certainly paychecks, that's outsourced.
Oh, yeah, well, there's payroll, there are benefits.
Yeah.
There,
Benefits are ruled by New York
dispute
State law.
resolution.
Yeah, and contracts, yeah.
And then also creating standards and manuals, and all the things that you absolutely have. It's kind of crazy to take that on ourselves.
Yeah.
So BJ, we had, I went to one of the Burma conferences, and there was a lady there with, who was giving a speech about her company and what she does, and there's two sides, the commercial side and the private side, and she works with the commercial. So her company basically does what Ben says, it provides all that HR service and support to there, and I was getting her on board to rewrite the handbook at the time, and then I wasn't here long enough to get that done, but
Right. No,
that's
they,
exactly what I
yeah.
was talking about. That's what they do. So
Right.
when new legislation and everything changes within the state, within the feds, whatever, we automatically get all those updates
Yeah,
and all that stuff stays current.
yeah.
Well, we have that with the attorney, the one who,
Ms. Zuckerman.
thank you. So they help with all of our labor
Related
policy,
things,
labor
yeah.
law, things like that. So our,
It's super expensive.
no, they're on
It's pretty
retainer.
reasonable.
It's actually not bad.
We don't pay the partner rate.
They like us. But they help with our employee manual, the employee handbook. It has all the laws, the rules, regulations,
Because basically everything is
procedure.
unionized here.
Yeah.
And then all employee benefits are overseen by the New York State, you have your retirement system
Yep.
and your health benefits. And so there is an employee here that does oversee and is the connection to all of that.
Yeah.
And then payroll is handled in-house, through a payroll system.
So
So
who oversees those individual units?
Supervisor.
That's usually the
Supervisors
HR
the
person, though.
supervisor's office has a clerk, an account clerk, that position is called. And there's one person, we shouldn't talk about a person given a name, but there's an account clerk within the supervisor's office that handles those duties. And that's actually overseen under civil service. They have to meet the credentials. Everybody in town is under basically civil service unless you are a confidential secretary to like the supervisor
But if an
or.
employee has a problem or a question, or especially if it's an issue, a conflict with the supervisor, to whom would they go? Or to whom would they lodge a
Well, if they're
complaint?
union, they go to their union, right?
Go to your
Yeah.
union rep. And I think now you have an ethics and compliance
Now we have an
committee,
ethics
so
board.
now
Yeah, the
they
ethics
go
board.
through there.
So that
So
would
there's
be.
all, so they're kind of separated all over the place instead of having some kind of central guidance, which HR performs that function, even if they don't do everything. They're kind of the clearinghouse for everything,
Right.
making sure everything gets done
Right.
properly.
And the mindset here, just so you know, is, oh, that would be great, budget. That would be great, budget. That, that's the mindset. Taxes, taxes, taxes.
Well,
And so if we're going to hire new people, we want to hire new people? Do we want an HR person, which seems to be going fairly okay? Or do we want to hire the planner? That's the decision every year. You're going to add another 100, 150 to the budget. That's a lot, with benefits and all. It's a lot, in terms of percentage increase.
It's not unusual for smaller companies to have someone who does multiple jobs, right? So they may do operations and HR, right? And then you have your specialty areas, and to Ben's point, a lot is outsourced.
How many employees do we have total now?
What do I want to say, 70, isn't
I
it?
was gonna say 67 or something like that.
it's not a tiny
Yeah.
business.
That isn't.
It's a good-sized business if you look at it.
Yeah, there's a lot, we have a lot of people.
Yeah, but we can, but then increase profitability.
But you can also,
Different, it's sort of different.
We don't talk about it, we don't.
Oh, no, I absolutely think, because I think that's actually a choice that needs to be made. Do we want the HR person? Do we want the planner? We got to add staff.
But in terms of good best practices, you
Yeah.
want to take that into consideration too.
also, is it one of those things that, is that a position that can be shared across other small towns?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that would be really
It kind of
nice.
gets back to looking at the whole structure and roles and responsibilities, and are there things that people should be doing? It's kind of, what do you need to do versus what are the nice, things, right? And can you look at the composition of certain roles and change them,
Yeah.
right? So that you are focusing on the priorities.
Right.
What happens, and just, what you have to always deal with is like, those are always good things, was I believe in all of that, like when I kind of reassess stuff down where I work. But here within civil service, you have to kind of look at everyone, then make sure they are underneath the right classification, and then find out, okay, so now here are those things. What job and what classification, what title do we need, and then where do we go? So you have this other mix of things to
You
deal
kind of
with.
have to make sure that the job that they are doing meets their classification, that they're not doing something outside of their role, outside of their job definitions.
So what do other small towns do?
They don't have an overarching HR person. They
No one
have what we
does.
have.
They just.
They have a
Or
person.
you have a consultant that if you have an HR issue, it goes to the consultant, like that's kind of what we do. If you have a significant issue, then it goes to the consultant. And if anybody reports to anybody, it's supposed to go up the chain and make sure that it's addressed. So, there is policy and procedure in place for that. So it's all in the employee handbook, exactly how you handle different situations. If you have a problem with your direct supervisor, who do you talk to? If you have, so it's kind of all outlined there. It's a significant handbook.
Is that referenced anywhere in this?
But is that governance or is that just internal admin?
It's
know.
kind of the internal admin, so we didn't really get that nitpicky with it because, and it changes with the law. So if there's adjustments made to the law, then we have to adjust the handbook. So you'll notice there's a lot of resolutions adjusting the handbook, and then we reissue the handbook annually, and everybody has to read and sign off on it. So, yeah.
Well, just one last thing under the organizational chart again, we don't have anything for Commissioner of Public Works, which controls probably most assets of the town.
Say more what you mean by that, Jay.
Right, so there should be a dual, say a highway super, and then should be a parallel.
Oh,
Commissioner
yeah.
of Public Works next to highway,
Yeah.
two separate functions.
Yeah.
So is this chart all up to date in terms
No,
of?
no.
Chart
No,
itself.
this chart needs some major overhaul, but it's,
There's still like, obviously old names.
yes.
Chart.
And there probably shouldn't be names at all, should there?
No, there shouldn't be any names associated with it. It should really just be the organization and the different titles. It shouldn't have been, so this is really old and we're gonna completely,
It's noted.
yeah.
It was noted by them, by our consultants as well, in the red.
Department of Works.
Yeah. But I think the idea of it's a good one with the, so people get a sense of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The structure.
yeah.
It might be interesting too, if you color coded the positions with something to indicate that these are new since the last strategic plan or something like that, with a note to that effect. So that you have a visual of the changes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great idea, Wendy.
interesting.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, that just makes it really easy.
That's a good way of doing it.
Right. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding all of the notes that you guys are giving me into this chapter in side notes and edits, and then I'm going to download the chapter with all the comments and edits, and that's going to go to Noah and his team at the consulting group. All right.
I noticed that BJ said something that's against the law to use online platforms. When I see some of the committees seem to be meeting online.
Well, no, every meeting is hybrid in this town, every one, all the committees, there's one that's not, it's Taylor's Island, but all the rest are hybrid. But if you're a member of that committee on the board, you cannot be zooming in unless it's a family emergency. So that's what I meant. You can't hold your meetings online and call it part of a quorum. That's what we faced here. So that's what I meant. Was I addressing something that you were not talking about?
No, I guess part
Part
of
of
the
my day.
problem is there's a reference to how difficult it is to get volunteers for these committees because of the nature of this town.
It's a vacation or a seasonal, yeah.
So that eliminates a lot of participation.
But that's what our whole problem this year when Governor Hochul changed the law.
Right. So she made changes to.
That's why we had to cancel meetings.
Yeah.
Well, to drive people back into the office.
Exactly, exactly. And it made it more difficult for us, a small
Yeah.
town community with a lot of.
What, was that only during COVID? Was the law different before COVID?
Yes.
That's what I'm asking. It
Yes.
was just during COVID that we had the chance to Zoom for our
Yes.
quorum.
And we were allowed
So that before COVID, it was exactly the way it is
And now we were left with the Zoom, which is nice, because people, even if you can't attend, you're on vacation, if it's okay with the rest of your committee members, and you're not, the work's getting done, you can still Zoom in and stay abreast of what's going on, and, so it hasn't been 100% because of the quorum issue, but I don't think it's been terrible for a first year, getting
No.
back into it.
No.
We were spoiled during COVID, but the flexibility was spoiling. And so, now that we lost that flexibility, it's frustrating because, it felt very efficient. It felt like you had that flexibility.
And to add one more thing, Stephen Kiley has asked for a review from somebody in Albany about the uniqueness of our situation and could we be exempt to some extent, whatever that might be.
Volunteer committees be exempt, like the planning board, zoning board can't be because they're paid state,
versus.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus, and regulatory versus not.
Exactly.
So we're asking for,
That's very good.
yeah, hopefully that won't take 2 years, because it's Albany.
Well, it's one of those ideas that is a good one, but it has unintended consequences that are damaging.
Right.
Right.
So
I think going forward, though, if we have the opportunity to do hybrid, that does give us the option to engage more people from a volunteer perspective in,
Yeah, we would never not. I mean, if we were allowed to,
yeah,
The reality of the world is that this is how life is going to be.
yeah.
Right.
Not every company is going back 5 days a
No,
week.
in fact,
So this is,
40% of people are choosing to remain nationwide.
I don't know Eddie.
I know, I'm in the position,
I
like we're
know
looking, is it
too.
gonna be 3, is it gonna be 4? And so hybrid is
Right.
the new word, right? And
That's
so
true.
we need to just embrace it and just move on, and so, and still keep getting work done, right?
Right.
absolutely. I hope it comes back in our favor.
So,
Right, yeah, if we don't have to meet the quorum numbers for some of the committees, like in person, and you can still have the meetings with everybody in attendance via Zoom, that would be great for us.
Yeah.
But that's what we have.
We want to add something around that, of, pending hybrid as a more formal, ongoing arrangement. We could look to engage more members of the community. I think that's important.
It's really just whether or not the open meetings law changes to allow us to do that. For committees.
I think it's going to.
I can hope.
Not imagine that continues in perpetuity.
It does seem kind of silly.
But using the distinction between elected or appointed versus
volunteer.
is a reasonable criteria to use, so that you can still ask all your state legislators to show up in Albany.
Which they should.
Yeah. It seems like a no-brainer, so. Okay. Okay.
Switching gears a little bit.
Yep.
So I was just reading through it. It mentions the town code. Is that review triggered automatically upon completion of the comprehensive plan, or is that something that?
Sean, what page is that? Just,
I was just scrolling through. What did it?
oh,
Legislation, town code
Yeah,
on.
page 8.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so is that some, obviously this is going to have effects to the town code. I know there's issues with it. It's not the most clear in certain chapters and ordinances. So at what level does that town code get reviewed?
Well,
And is that something, do we have to put in here?
So,
Maybe, yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm kicking it to Noah.
yeah, maybe if you can give an example, and then I can, chime back in, like what types of things are we talking about?
Let's say changing the permitting process to be more efficient, that requires changing in the code. What would trigger us to take that task on once the comprehensive plan is complete? Is that your question, kind of?
More or less.
Yeah, I guess I was also asking like what types of like town code things. So anything land use related, we'll certainly, hopefully uncover in the process of talking to people. And if the permitting process isn't working, we can certainly do a preliminary kind of assessment of what needs to happen. Maybe it needs to go here as opposed to there. But if additional work is needed, to kind of iron things out, you can do it after the plan is done. That type of thing could also be done before the plan is done. You don't necessarily need to wait for the plan. Zoning changes to zoning should be based on the well-reasoned plan, but if there are other codes and ordinances and kind of cleanup type things, it doesn't necessarily need it. It's just helpful. I guess it's cleaner to wait till the comprehensive plan is done. But just a thought. I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Yeah, and I think also to help answer your question, once the comprehensive plan is, approved by the board and adopted, then there's like the whole implementation phase. So when we go through, we'll kind of have some of these ranked by priority, like what things need to happen now and what things can happen later. And so then it's kind of up to the town board to choose what topics they tackle first. Yeah. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Related to that, is there going to be a chance for the community to respond to this prioritization of these action plans? How are we going to just physically do that? And that should be something that we collectively all agree the most important thing that we need to accomplish first is going to be X.
Right.
And if we can come to agreement, or these 5 things, the next administration must deal with this. I mean, how do we get that feedback from people? How do we come together with that kind of thing?
Hard, John. Like,
I know,
hard beyond the ability to do.
But we have to have, a goal with that. There's got to be a way of accomplishing this, so we really know where we are going.
You mean a list of priorities that comes out of a community input in priorities? Well, that's one of the.
Sorry. I think it shows up in our public outreach meetings. I think, especially they become more important the closer we get to the completion. But, we had some of our biggest meetings out in the summer and into the fall. I think that's our largest opportunity because we have a lot of these action plans already fleshed out. I think that's a good opportunity to engage the community at large, right?
Prioritized. So in other words, we haven't done the hard work amongst ourselves here to say, okay, this is what, we should be doing. The community office can weigh in on their own when the time comes to that. But maybe we should make it easier for the community to focus on things.
Well, and if I hear what you're saying, John, it's not just on a per chapter basis. You're saying for the entirety of the comprehensive
Chapter by
plan.
chapter, yes.
Yeah, but then it's sort of,
But that's going to then lead us a direction, which
Yeah.
we then have to have part of.
Well, I think part of it will also depend on what's happening in town at the time. Are we dealing with a situation that requires that we address it in the code? So maybe we have inadequate protections or inadequate zoning, or we determined there's something wrong with zoning and we're having an issue, then maybe that should be the priority because that's what we're
I
struggling with at the
understand.
moment. Yeah, I think that might help.
Has been working for the last 50 years that I know of. I call it the finger in the dike procedure. And
Yeah.
so the next hot button thing, we're all over it.
Oh, I agree.
And we let everything else go by the wayside.
Yeah.
And I think there has to be a way of keeping everybody equally on task with overall goal. How we do that in governance, I'm not quite sure, but that's why like a manager maybe be the person who does that.
Noah, do you have any recommendations for that? How to prioritize how you implement this plan?
Yeah, I mean, we will create a table and we'll use our kind of best judgment on kind of I would say a low-hanging fruit, difficulty to implement, cost, time frame. Some things just take a long time because of the regulatory procedures involved. I'm sure you're familiar with some of those, just getting a wastewater, facilities implemented, really, there are things that require 5-10 years, other things that can be done right away. So we can provide that list. What I do suggest is that you have some kind of a subcommittee, whether it's this committee that really kind of reviews the list every year with the town board. So it doesn't kind of sit on a shelf. It can be a living document, and there might be new priorities that come up. So it could be a table that where things get checked off, new things get put on. Some things that might seem like priorities now might not seem like a priority in a year or two, depending on changing conditions. So, I think we just see it as a living document, and you'll have to continue to work with the community and through the town board to implement those items. I don't know. It's hard. It's not an exact science, and oftentimes these things come down to budget. And sometimes you think that there is a consensus on certain things, and there isn't. That's why, wouldn't necessarily expect everything on the list to be done in the next 5 years, but you can certainly, it's important to have a goal, a point to look forward, to, a direction to go.
May I just say, it's apropos what we've just been talking about. In the section on my page 9 of the printed copy under comprehensive planning, when there is a review of prior plan, the 1994 plan and the attempted 20809, I'd like to see some specifics. There was a list of items to be checked off as what to be done, and I'd like to see, it says some have been adopted and implemented and others haven't been. It would be very nice to be really specific there. I think it would be helpful, to look back and see what have we followed through on and what is missing on those plans. And I think there was a chart in the 208, 209, if I remember correctly, that had checkoffs on all the action items.
Right, they created like a prioritization system.
Right, just what we're talking about. So it isn't that we haven't been there before.
Well,
We might remind ourselves.
it's probably a good appendix.
Yeah, it would be a good appendix. And in the 2008, they went through and they noted all the things that had been addressed from the 94 and the things that hadn't been addressed. So you have an update as of 2008. So kind of what you're talking about is doing an update from 2008 to now on what's been addressed and what hasn't been addressed.
Right.
It's kind of what this plan is.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of what we have to take into consideration.
But it would be good to see it here. What's missing? What was recommended earlier? What's missing? It would be, I think it would be helpful, actually very helpful to us, not take much work to put in.
Yeah, no, I made the chart that compared the 94 goals and objectives of 2008 and then had opening for today. So you could go through and look and see what needed to get carried over because maybe it hadn't been addressed or what had been addressed and no longer needs to be carried over. So that's in the SharePoint. And that's what BJ and I have been using to create the action items. So we've been comparing the past few plans and then anything that seemed to be missing or hadn't been addressed, we carried over. So that's where some of our action items now came from, previous plans that hadn't been accomplished.
Okay.
I just asked one of my graybeards, guys have been around a while, on Shelter Island.
Yeah, dude, you count.
Maybe you don't want to be, I don't know. But we have had deputy supervisors back, Ben Waddington, Sharon,
Oh, okay.
Chris Lewis. I think Amber was the first one that had the specific fiscal sort of duties, but we've have had them, just so that we know that.
But was the charge in the documentation, or I thought the
I just
first
know-
one was
I think-
Amber?
No,
Maybe because of signatures, we needed signer, yes, you're right,
right? So it was always it gets handled in our organizational meeting at the beginning of the year.
Right.
It's set up then for the next year.
Yeah, my bad.
What?
My grandma brain's going.
That's why you gotta have these graybeards out there.
Because Amber's had more responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone have any other recommendations? So some of the comments we've received online for the last 2 months,
You all
March
have
and
that,
April.
yeah.
So we did have one comment on governance that the comprehensive plan be forthright with the goals of the comprehensive plan, and that they're not necessarily consistent with some of the resources available from town government. So the lack of town resources presents a significant risk to meeting the needs of the community. And I think that's kind of something that we're addressing in these action items with, the need for possibly a town planner or a town manager or a facilities master plan. It's kind of addressing some of those deficits, saying, okay, yeah, as we currently stand, we may not be able to meet some of these goals, but if we make some of these improvements, then we may be able to meet some of those goals. So that one was specific to governance. And then, John, we had your comments, the flow chart. Yeah, the flow chart's outdated. We do know that. We'll update it. And then, John, you're concerned about keeping the comp plan forefront of all decision-making by boards and committees, making sure it's a living, working document. That's something that we'll work on towards the end of this, once we kind of have the document. What are going to be the implementation procedures and how are we going to ensure that it gets carried through? And then, and then I made a comment in here. I was in a meeting, so I just made notes that we need to clean up and better define the permitting and application process for some of the different things in the building department. Like we don't specifically have a site plan application, so everything goes through a special permit application. And we could clean that up and streamline it so it's more efficient. And so that the questions are tailored more to the application.
Are these comments also in the document, the chapter, they're separate?
They're separate. They're the ones that people submit online, but I do go through and I try to incorporate these then into the chapter. And
Now the
It's nice when you can
consultant
see
will.
everything in one place.
exactly. And then the consultants are given both the chart from all the online submissions and the chapter with all of our comments and notes. So they have all this information to work with.
I wonder, under tax levy, since so much new spending is proposed, I wonder if it's important to try to look at the breakdown of the taxes. For example, how many tax exemptions there are and what type they are. How do businesses get taxed on the island? What is the difference between taxes perhaps coming from full-time versus part-time or seasonal residents? These are all figures that would be relevant to this document.
No.
I mean, I hear the library, we now have a percentage of the budget, but the library is proposing a almost $10 million new structure. We have the school, which is half of our town budget.
But that's not
So we have a
ours.
lot, pardon?
That's not ours. You know, that's theirs. They're kind of really separate.
Yeah, well, the town, right, part of it.
Yeah.
Part of it is property tax. So I'm just wondering whether a more comprehensive, I'm not a tax person, I'm just looking at this and saying a more comprehensive picture of revenue and what it's based on might be really useful.
Based on
as we
property
look-
value.
I feel it's an issue of.
Pardon?
I think what you're getting at is the issue of transparency.
Yes,
because
transparency.
So many people don't understand how their tax
Well said.
dollars are divided.
Exactly.
And by listing out how they're used
Well,
in a
well,
more comprehensive way.
forgive me, Ben, look at the budget.
I was gonna say,
That's how it's used.
Not everybody, by putting it here, so it's concise.
Yes,
plain.
it should be here too.
Well, I think that because the tax issue and the percentages and things change year to year, they do fluctuate. And this is a document that is supposed to carry through for many years. I don't know that this is the appropriate place to dive into the taxes. What I do think we should do is look at the way we do our budget and make it more user-friendly for people to understand.
The school
I
does a
think that it
three-part,
should
like a-
be,
Yeah.
it should be more user-friendly. So I think that would be an action item that we could add, is create a more user-friendly budget process for the public to help understand. And so they can see the breakdown of what goes to the library, what goes to the school, what goes to the town, and why and where it goes.
But Ben is
Well,
also
there is
talking
a
about
tax
within the
levy
town.
here.
He's also talking within the town. And, you know, where's the money spent within the town? We can
Right.
see school, we can see library, you want to know how it's, so.
That
From the
process could
school,
help.
you guys they give you a summary of the budget.
I'm not the school.
I know, but you used to be,
Yes, yes.
And by the way, the school does a great job.
But that would add to the transparency.
Yes, but we started that a long time ago when I was.
There is a chart that tells us that, you know, 0.118, what goes to the library from our $6.20.36.
So what more information could go there?
But what revenue comes in from where? This is what I'm talking
The
about.
only revenue, the revenue is the taxes, the property
I'm asking, I have no idea what the exemptions are, how business is
I think what
taxed in
Lily's
this
asking,
community.
if you let me,
Yeah.
I think what Lily's asking is from help from the consultants, to see what other towns are doing.
Yeah.
How can we present this better?
Thank you.
Just by saying, no, this is not getting us there. But we want to do the best that we can, and the consultants can help us tweak this so that it can be a little more clear.
Yeah, I had added the comment that I found this seemed to imply that things were negative or positive, but there was no real explanation to it. And as just kind of a reader to it, in fact, it's a Shelter Island was listed among the 20 municipalities with the lowest effective tax rates. Is that a good thing or bad thing? I mean, we're grouped with Southampton and East Hampton, not exactly poverty-stricken areas. So what does that mean? And so that kind of decoding and explanation would be helpful. Yeah.
And that's where I'm saying, I don't know that it's actually, like, that amount of information is actually appropriate to be in the comprehensive plan, because it does change and fluctuate. And I think that what we need is a cleaner, more understandable budget process and budget document, so that is where all that information gets disseminated.
Everything changes.
Yes. Because, right, but that's
Everything
because.
changes annually. Voter tallies are in here, they change each election.
And
So
I think it's probably
the
inappropriate that they're in here.
Fluctuation applies to almost everything.
So maybe our consultants could guide us.
Lola, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, we've worked on a lot of plans, and I am familiar with other plans. You might find some that touch on tax policy, but it's uncommon, I would say, to do that in a comprehensive plan. It's, I think addressing it in the way of, having more transparency, but the annual budgeting process is there, that's there for a reason. If it's in the comprehensive plan, it's not binding per se. The capital budget is, that is the budgetary process where you kind of make decisions. And so it's, you can address it in the comprehensive plan, but it's, if you really want to kind of, the place to do it is really the budgeting process to get into, what, is the mill rate, low, high, how should we be addressing, revenues, that sort of thing. It's just not usually typically the place where we kind of get into it.
Right.
That's just my experience. It's also politically loaded and would easily, could kind of, make a plan go south because everyone has different opinions, obviously on taxes. And so it's just, it's a hornet's nest.
Yeah.
I think some of that information also comes out at budget time. There'll be an article in the paper saying from the taxation people, what are the exemptions? Where's this money coming from? What pile goes where? And then that's in there. So you get your new assessment, that type of thing. Plus our individual statements we get. So it is.
There are issues. Yeah, there are issues that can be certainly brought up, like that. If there are a lot of nonprofit uses or tax exemptions, we can certainly bring them up as issues to be addressed in the budget.
Right.
So it sounds like, some greater transparency about the budgeting process.
Yes.
Right.
It is, it's out, the process is out, like here, in this room with cameras. That is the process. I mean, it's very,
So just describing it.
Yeah.
Oh.
How's it communicated after
Yeah,
the fact?
exactly, right, or just how do people?
Break it down in a
Get
more
information.
digestible format.
Yeah. Oh.
I don't think a lot of people.
No, I don't think people.
That's why we need that notify.
Pardon?
That's why we need the notify me.
Notify me that the budget.
Yeah, we would say,
right.
listen, on Tuesday, if you're
Yeah.
interested,
We're going to be discussing the highway budget.
Yeah,
that's open, come.
yeah,
listen
I
to-
just don't think a lot of
listen to
people.
Well, I also don't think that the document that we put out when all is said and done is user-friendly, so.
Yeah.
At the Association of Towns, Amber and I were looking into other methods for managing the budget and for presenting the budget to the public. And so there are a whole bunch of programs now that help you develop a budget, and it comes with visuals and descriptions and really helps the public understand what the budget that you're proposing means. So we've been looking into that kind of thing too. So we'll see how that goes, but that's, so as an action
That I think is
item,
good.
develop a more user-friendly budget for the public.
Like the school.
Exactly, like the school.
No,
So-
but showing, having better visuals and stuff,
Right.
when you guys meet, when you're sitting home and watching it, it's a whole
It
different
really
thing.
does
You're
help.
not seeing stuff on the screen, and even the school could do a better visual on their screen, because
Yeah.
you don't see stuff so well.
Yeah,
I just
no,
have to
it's
say
true.
it. As a former commissioner, it just bothers me that the library budget is that much higher than the public works budget
Mhm,
for the entire town.
mhm.
Okay, that's
Duly
important
noted.
comment to make, because we certainly have a lot to say about
People tend to
transportation.
support the library, which I'm very much in favor of,
Right,
but I think they would also want to support the rest of the stuff we have too.
Like infrastructure.
Traffic, the bike lanes, the flood proofing,
Yeah,
these are perhaps issues that can be addressed, priorities.
Right.
Priorities depending upon priority.
Right.
I said it, done.
yeah.
And everything we're doing is ultimately, Noah, everything is really political. It's not just the tax,
public works.
the tax issue.
It's public work.
I
Right.
don't know, it's-
So,
3%?
It's, now where does that?
you made it first, for example, you made a comment at the beginning about perhaps something about towns that do a lot of zoning and development needing planners. Well, to put in as an action item, the need for a planner on this, you can't separate this chapter out from other chapters that are asking for really widespread changes in zoning and the development potential is going to come. So these are connections, between items and chapters that we have to keep in mind.
So where does the analysis come when we look at houses being renovated, bought, sold, upgraded, and how that affects the taxes on a tax base?
It's not in
I don't
here.
think it does.
It
Why
does.
does it?
Well, it makes the denominator bigger. You know, the denominator is the assessed value of the town. It makes that bigger. And in a real term, not in an inflationary term. And so by doing that, right, it lowers theoretically, if nothing else went on, if nobody got a raise and our health insurance stayed the same, year to year, your tax rate would go down because you've added more value to your tax base. So that's how. That's exactly, but there's no place to put that in here, or no reason
So
to.
when they're building the big houses, right, those people are paying a lot more taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so you go a lot of years, you don't pay any increase. Because they've been offsetting that, so where is that analysis?
Well, it's not, it's just a fact,
I know that.
yeah,
There's gotta be a way to figure it out.
We say it's a fact,
yeah.
but unless we see it in black and white.
But I mean, what's to analyze, I don't understand.
Well, you can look at how, I think, building permits probably go and what the tax base is.
And we can
And
show
then-
over
and
the
the
last
assessments.
decades, like what that's done to the tax base. Right.
And is that just because it's interesting? I mean, I'm wondering, how does that help us
It also
plan for the
helps,
future?
well, it helps if the tax base increases at a certain level.
Yeah.
That could fund the positions that you're looking for, right? Which,
Concrete over everything
Yeah.
and just build.
There-
Well, you know what?
not saying I'm in favor of that, but
And that will really help our fragile aquifer.
Yeah.
Just put more concrete.
And we're talking
on the
about a
ground.
moratorium on bigger houses and maybe
Right,
trying to
exactly.
rein them in.
More housing, more
So-
accessory dwelling
You
units.
know,
I think Noah has something
Yeah.
to say.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, I don't want to like necessarily dwell into it, but the other option is a lot of communities charge higher building permit fees, and that kind of sometimes pays for itself.
Oh, yeah.
And I know it's not always popular, but
They're very high.
Yeah.
those okay. So yeah, so I don't really know, but what they are, but that oftentimes some
Yes.
departments I know of pay for themselves basically through those fees.
Right. This administration's been trying to do that more and more. It's not universally popular, but I can't say it's universally unpopular either.
Right.
$42.
that was a good one.
Say it.
Noah, what do you think of our discussion? How'd we do?
It's good. I have a number of items that are new that we didn't talk about. I mean, one, let me just look. I kind of highlighted a couple items. We'll obviously look into the possibility of a deputy supervisor and what the kind of procedure is for that. I just quickly looked online and it looks like, I guess that can be appointed either by the existing supervisor or by the town board. But anyways, we'll have to kind of look at that.
Yeah, see if it can be made contractual. Like you could sign, maybe sign a 4-year, maybe a 1-year or a 6-month provisional, and then if the person works out, to say a 6-year that would span
To administration.
2 administrations, and then, again, performance-based then. I don't know
Right.
if that's legal, I'm saying maybe that could be it. I think they should do in schools.
Yeah, so we'll definitely look into that. We talked about committees. Why do we have so many committees? How do they evaluate themselves? So there's a need for kind of an annual performance review for those committees. Perhaps they can make a presentation or have some kind of joint meeting. Let's see, what do we have? This is something that I was thinking, just that whatever we decide to do on this chapter in particular, I think it should be probably reviewed or gone over with the town board, just because they'll be the ones legislating it. So we probably want to make sure that they're on board with any changes having to do with governance. There were questions about the open meetings law and the desire for more hybrid if possible. So that was a good point. We can talk about that, the need to kind of incorporate or make it more accessible for all people. And there might also be opportunities to, teach people how to use Zoom, and, I don't know, might be some education involved that the town could do. There's a need for a prioritization list, looking back at what's been done and, in the past since prior plans. Which has already been started. We'll continue to kind of include that. Let's see. I have We talked about taxes, the need to kind of improve the communication for the budgetary process. And then, there are some other things that need to be addressed, such as tax exempt properties and yeah, anyways, I've kind of been taking notes all along, so I probably missed a couple things, but
And we
yeah.
threw in, Meg has mostly, and I've done a few on the chapter itself that we'll send you.
Yeah, so we've been taking notes and adding action items and comments in the chapter that the rest of the committee is looking at right now. So what we'll do after the meeting is download the chapter with all the comments and edits and notes, and we'll send you that version with all the markups. So you have all the notes from tonight too, from our conversations.
And in the plan, I think we've talked with BJ and Meg about this, but it's possible that the governance chapter might be integrated with some other chapters because there's a lot of crossover, for example, with the police department, with the fire department, and with other community facilities. So so we're looking at kind of consolidating and making kind of finding maybe a slightly better organization. So that's in the works.
I don't know that I see how that can work, since the police and the others are particularly descriptive, and this is really, well, so it remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be some editing. When we made the chapters, we really added everything, including the kitchen sink. So, they'll go through and they'll weed some things out that may not be totally pertinent to the effectiveness of the comp plan. And I'm sure that they'll be able to come up with something that solves, like suits everybody's needs.
Textual yet not
Yeah.
wordy.
Does anyone have any other ideas or comments, questions, notes for this chapter?
Everybody's okay that we didn't review the comments that were made in the chapter, that we just pass them on? Nothing's very controversial, frankly.
No,
They're just pointing out things that need to be updated or explained,
Right.
right? As far as I can tell, unless someone has something that they remember. I guess only really 3 people commented.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of those because I kind of scanned through them as we were going to make sure we didn't miss anything big.
Yeah,
But I think we hit all the,
We did.
I think we hit all the points.
yeah.
All right, if nobody has anything from here, I'll go to the audience. Kim Nolan?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. This is like midnight, after midnight my time, so I apologize for any inappropriateness on my part.
Same here.
There were a lot of good ideas here tonight. I'm not going to talk about the good ideas. I'm just going to talk about the things that bothered me. First, with respect to committees, I think the committees are citizen committees that are checks and balances. So I would advocate keeping those committees separate, not trying to control them, not trying to pack them, as some administrations have packed a Supreme Court with people that just advocate the town view. With respect to the need for a planner, the need for a planner is probably like a really good idea, but it all depends on who you get. So, I guess my view would be you get a planner that knows the island, cares about the island, and has some credentials. And credentials mean education, both operational and environmental. With respect to the specifics of implementations, it is critical that you tell the people and the community what action specifics you want to take. It's really unclear to the public what these chapters say so far. I'm sorry, I've spent a lot of time on it. I know you spent more, especially since we have a situation where really just a couple people are writing this. I look back at the other comprehensive plans that contain a task force that have 10, 20 people on them. Now, I know this is a different structure, but it does strike me that it's putting a lot of work on just a couple people. And maybe there should be more people involved.
Sort of past that.
Pardon me?
So we're
You're
sort of
past
past.
that, BJ? Is that what you said? You're
We're sort of,
past
yeah, I
that?
was gonna say, we're sort of past that. It's now with the
Well, let me
consultants.
talk to you about something that you were also past without any response to me whatsoever. I'm the president of the SIA, and I wrote to you in April of a year ago, and I didn't get any response on my request for a holistic water plan for this island. Now, Meg has told me that
There is
water is
one.
going to be in every chapter, but I still don't see a response to the letter I wrote. Now, again, it's after midnight my time, so I'm sorry if I seem a little bit adversarial, but I'm going to stop now. And I will just leave you with
sessions,
this.
though, right?
we-
Where we're soliciting.
Yes, no, and I'm
input
sorry I
from-
didn't get back to you, but it is, the water plan is incorporated, the Shelter Island 2020 water plan
Water management plan.
is part of this document.
I know
Um,
you have attached it to the chapter on natural resources, but for anybody reading this, they don't know what the plan is. What is going to happen here? What are the action steps? Are you going for, I know you're going for a wastewater treatment facility. Are you going for municipal water for the island? Where's it going to start and where's it going to be? Because there's just so many things that aren't spelled out.
Thank you, Kim.
And I noticed, for example, in the 2008 plan, they have a huge section on the storm drains and a lot of very specific action items that they were going to take in that plan. And I guess, okay, now you're bringing me to one final large comment, which is, again, please tell us what your overall plan is for the island. Are you going to develop it with municipal water, or are you going to respect the environment and the sense of place that it already has?
I'm gonna just, I'm just gonna say that the municipal water thing, again, it's already as of right, if 40% of people in a neighborhood request water, they can get it. It's not really something that we could prevent, as far as I know.
It's something that has been mentioned because it enabled, this is a whole other.
Yeah, I was just
It
gonna say,
enabled
this is.
the T, what is it called again? The transfer of development rights. You need to have a public, it's tied up with development, as is the wastewater plant. And these are unstated linkages that are not made clear and transparent in the plan and the chapter. To do commercial and residential development, you need a wastewater plant to handle Suffolk County. And if you want to transfer, and you need public water supply, if you want to transfer the building rights.
Is that in the next chapter?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that
I hear you.
for
Transparency.
No one's denying her that. So the next chapter that we're going to be discussing is the natural environment chapter, and that's at the end of this month. And all of those topics are addressed in that chapter. So that will be the next meeting's conversation.
Okay.
We were hoping to
Okay.
get to a little tonight, but I
Later.
think we ran out of time.
Yeah.
Although I'd stay. if you want.
Can I just offer a comment? Because I've heard this kind of response from Kim and other people that have called in before, still accusing members of the task force specifically, I guess not.
Can you go to the podium?
Yes, I'm sorry, okay.
Thank you.
Hi, so I just wanted to address Kim's comment about the task force somehow composing parts of this comprehensive plan without input. I mean, we have all the committee members here. Every one of you has the prose that was originally written. It's all in
No,
SharePoint.
not all chapters. We haven't had anything to do with the last 4 chapters as we've
scheduled.
It's coming up in the next month and a half.
It's
Okay, well, could you
scheduled.
say that it's on the agenda and there's really
Now it's on the
nothing that's gonna
agenda.
be presented that's gonna slip under the eyes of someone and
No.
not be seen, right? You guys are all, so do we as a committee all agree that we have access to these documents? We have input? And I see them too, by the way. So I'm not a council person and I'm copied on everything and I see what goes out to all the committee members. So I really take offense to this repeated comments about the task force composing things and that it's not being shared. That's why we have public comments. That's why we disseminate these things to some of the associations to elicit public input. So I would really, I beg of, Kim and some of the others to just give it a chance, let the committee and the public weigh in, let the consultants weigh in, and let's just get back to what we said we were going to do.
And we're still writing, and the consultants are going to create, and then we are going to get working with our public sessions of comments to get to the action plans and a final proposal for us all to get to. This is still a work in progress.
Well, and that will also help define the vision for the island moving forward. When we see what the needs are, what we have, what we don't have, what we think we need, what we think we don't need, what we want to see happen, what we don't want to see happen, that will also help solidify the vision for what we want moving forward. Because it's kind of hard to just say, ooh, I would love to see this perfect magical place happen, and then you're just going to gear all your goals toward that, but it may not be realistic. You have to look at what you actually have and what you have to work with and what the law states and what your regulatory agencies say. And from that, you can figure out what is an actual viable vision for the future. And that's what we're working toward. And we still have 3 chapters to go, so it's not done. No one's saying those chapters are final. This is a very rough draft that we have given the consultants to work with, and they're going to change it. I mean, they're probably going to combine chapters together because it works better and it flows. It will be different by the time it gets to a draft for the public to then comment on. This is us giving the consultants everything they could possibly need to create something that the public is going to be able to read and digest and understand. So that's where we're at this point.
But these comments that people are posting on the site can be very helpful.
Absolutely.
In guiding our
Absolutely. And they are all going to the consultants. They get incorporated into the chapters. We've been incorporating them all along. So none of this input that we've received has been tossed aside or neglected. And, Kim, the letter from the Shelter Island Association, that pertained to the environmental chapter, which we haven't reviewed yet. But yes, it did. Your comments were noted and they are incorporated into that chapter. So, we'll talk about that at the next meeting. Sean?
Can I just add one thing? You touched on it, vision. Yes, what the plan's overall goal is, overall plan. It's been a while since we worked on it. Go back to our very first chapter and look at what our stated vision statement is. This is what we are going towards. If it's out of sync with some of the subsequent work, then we need to evaluate that.
Right.
But I mean, it is very,
Consultants input on it. but-
yeah, it's very clear that, talking about growth, that it should not come at the expense of our natural and cultural resources. These are things that are very important to all of us and that we've prioritized. And it's in our very first chapter, our vision. So if something's out of sync,
Right.
obviously, it's great to provide a comment, but this is what this plan is striving to accomplish.
Right.
Well said. Well said.
We've done
Yeah.
great work. Some things we've spent a lot of time on. Now we're like we keep saying, we're getting into the thick of it. And these are just the early stages on these thick chapters. You have to just keep remembering that. This isn't the final version of these things. So we just have to steady the course. And just remember that. And
Right, oh, yeah, as long as we've been doing it, it's still early days.
yes, I know,
It's true.
I know.
It's
And-
true.
And we have Noah and crew now with us.
We do, which is excellent.
So we're kind of like doing it like he's working on stuff and we're in the early stages of these chapters and together we're going to meet with the public and it'll all be like 3 things in motion.
Right.
A pretty document.
Would it be helpful to just review the upcoming meeting focus?
Yeah, so the next meeting, the focus is the natural environment chapter. So the real focus is not so much like wordsmithing, because like I said, I'm sure that the consultants will edit the wordsmithing in the chapter, but really focus on the goals, objectives, action items, issues of concern, things that you want to see happen, things that we need to discuss in depth. What are the potential unintended consequences of some of these recommendations? And do we need to consider mitigations for them? really think that through and come with your edits, make your edits in the SharePoint document so we can all see and have that conversation beforehand, so we're prepared.
Because what was done this time was really good. You know, in terms of the comments.
Is it we're meeting in 1 week?
Yeah.
April
This is
24th.
It's the 24th.
Yeah, this is kind of a big,
really
this is a big chapter, I feel like.
Right.
Well, it may take
And
2
we,
meetings.
I was just gonna say, it may, I think we need to be realistic, that I think it'll take 2
Start
meetings.
it next week.
But yeah,
Yeah.
we'll definitely be starting it next week, and if we need
It would be helpful
to
if there were
push it,
comments
then
in
we
there,
can.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, would form a basis for discussion.
Yeah, so the hand went up again.
There's a hand from Kim.
I'm not sure she's put it down.
Yeah, I think it's been.
Kim has her hand
Do you
up.
have a question or comment?
Oh, yeah, I have one other comment. Actually, let me first say that someone here is referring to me, and I'm sorry that I seem to have spoken out of turn and given I don't know, it seems like you don't like to hear from me. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep talking. The other thing I wanted to say was Meg was talking tonight about streamlining the permit process. And I have just spent an enormous amount of time on this recent wetlands legislation. So again, I ask you for specifics. We want to know what your streamlining is intended to do, because streamlining can oftentimes weaken the current legislative process that we have to protect our environment. Thank you.
Thanks,
Yes.
Kim. All right, anybody else? Pam?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just want to reiterate one thing that Kim just said about the number of people participating as far as a group putting together this plan. The plan that was passed in 1994, there were 58 persons that were part of the advisory council committee, and there were 19 persons who were part of the task force. So I think that that's what Kim is trying to get across, is that this is a very small, almost elitist group of people taking on this task. And the better time you put out to the public and get more people in the public involved and understanding what the goal is and the vision of redoing this comprehensive plan is really important.
Yes.
That being said, moving on to the natural resources chapter, I kind of glanced at that because I know it's coming up for discussion. I just would like to let this committee know that there are many, many new environmental laws that have come to play since 1994. And I don't see any of that mentioned in the chapter, the regulatory agencies that are involved in protecting the environment and natural resources and how things have really changed. So, I mean, I'll do some information on some things that I think should be in, and maybe you can pass it around to the committee before the next meeting. There's just so much that's happened in the last 30 years on the environment, and now
Pam,
there's
if you-
the new green,
Pam,
and now
if you
there's the
have,
new green amendment.
yeah, no, I know, Pam, if you have that at your fingertips, can you add that to the bottom of the chapter where the comments are?
Yeah, I'm
I
gonna
mean,
do
it-
my best, BJ. I have a really
it-
busy week coming up. Is this coming up next week?
It is,
When you're
but,
discussing it?
but as Petra said, it probably won't, we won't get done with it. And it doesn't matter that even if we did, please, the comments come in 2 weeks, they'll be welcomed, your comments. It doesn't,
Yeah, because I really think, I think that a lot of people don't
Yeah.
really understand environmental law in this town. I know it's a very big topic, and it's a very complicated topic, and there are a lot of coming down from the federal agencies to the state to the local municipality. There's a lot of intricacies and things that need to go up and down that chain to make sure that everyone's rights are protected. And it's really about the health and welfare of our citizens. So, and the health of the island and
That's
the
sustainability.
opportunity to, keep it safe so people can go fishing and get their clams like they used to and do the scalloping that the island is based upon. Some of those basic businesses that, long ago kept this island attractive to many people for many reasons. So I'll be happy to do that. But, please take Kim's note on to part about how many people were involved in the 94. I mean, it really is astonishing. I was shocked when I counted how many people in it. And it is a shame that we can't seem to get more people involved, but whatever I can do, I'd be happy to help on that
Okay,
level.
thank you, Pam.
So I
Thank you,
appreciate
thank you,
everything
thank
you did tonight, and it's been a long day. So I hope you have a good evening. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank
So
you.
in 94, I participated with that, and I think we only had 2 meetings with like 50 people.
Yeah,
And we've already had one breakout session, we probably had 60, Coco could probably get us numbers,
yeah.
right? And I'm assuming there's gonna be more of those type.
Yes.
There will be. And there's also going to be meetings with specific groups of people like HOAs and, meeting with the different committees of the town. And so we're going to have more focused meetings with people in the town as we have a draft of the document complete. Like right now, it's so rough, it doesn't make sense to go and sit down and really nitpick stuff. But once we get a draft of the document, we can meet with these specific organizations and groups and be like, give us your input. That's coming up.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Noah, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, Noah, thank
Appreciate having
you.
here.
Of course,
I will
yeah.
I'll send you all of the notes for this chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.